Documents and records are two sides of the same coin. Documents like procedures and methods tell someone what to do, how to do it, and when it should be done. Records provide evidence of an event, action, or decision. Usually, people create records, but often you can have instruments and monitoring equipment that also provides data that ends up in a record. In this video, we're going to look at some characteristics of well-prepared documents and records. We'll also take a look at what your signature and initials mean as they're being used to help create reliable and trustworthy documents. Documents are often developed in a hierarchy, with some that are more detailed than others. For example, policies are usually the highest and least specific level of documents, providing information on what is to happen, why it is important, and who is responsible. At the next level of the document hierarchy are procedures, standard operating procedures, or SOPs. SOPs are more specific because they tell who is to do something, what is to be done, and how it is to be done. The next level down in the document hierarchy are work instructions. Work instructions are very specific. They usually apply to one particular task, one particular activity, and who is to do that activity. At the bottom level of the document hierarchy are records. Records provide independent evidence of an action, an event, or a decision. Policies, procedures, and work instructions are written by people who have knowledge and experience in performing the task. Procedures and work instructions also define the proper way to do a task, standardizing it so it is performed the same way at different times by different people. Before procedures, work instructions, and checklists can be used in a GMP or GDP environment, they need to be reviewed and approved to ensure they are correct, meet the regulatory requirements, and that they are consistent with the organization's goals and other policies and procedures. SOP users must be fully trained before they perform a task so they can safely and effectively perform it. Organizations usually have their own formats for SOPs, but they typically include the goal or purpose, the scope, when or where it is to be used, and then the procedural description, the instructions for how to do the task. Sometimes the procedures will also have definitions, flow diagrams, drawings, and sample forms. Procedures will also have the names and signatures of those who reviewed, approved, and wrote that procedure. It will also have the effective date. The effective date is when that procedure can first be used by qualified persons. Writing a procedure and work instructions is a skill, but it's not too difficult to learn. Here's some ideas that could help you as you're writing a procedure. First, flowchart the process. Try to break the process into 5 to 10 steps. Identify the information and materials, the inputs and outputs. Then, for each step, write down what happens and how it is to be done. If you have a sequence that must be followed exactly, use numbers or letters like 1, 2, 3 or ABC. Sometimes substeps or sub-substeps are needed to provide more detail. Be careful not to add too much detail to a procedure, because every time you add more detail, and if it's unnecessary, it makes it more and more difficult for the person to actually perform that task. It's always helpful to have a second person review the procedure that you're writing to make sure it's clear, it's understandable, and it can be performed as written. One other special type of document is a checklist. Checklists aren't procedures. Rather, they're tools that trained, experienced experts can use to help them perform the job better and more effectively. Dr. Atul Gawande, a surgeon, has used and written about the importance of checklists in healthcare. He says that a well-written checklist is precise, efficient, to the point, not detailed about everything, practical, and lists 5 to 9 items. Like procedures, checklists need to be considered controlled documents. They need to be reviewed, approved, and kept under change control. With that quick look at documents, like procedures and checklists and work instructions, now let's move to records, which provide evidence of how an action, decision, or event took place. If you've been in the pharmaceutical industry for even a short time, you've probably heard the expression, if it isn't written down, it didn't really happen. The importance of records is that they give evidence of that event. Records are used by people in the industry to let us know what has actually occurred. Records can also be used by regulatory officials to show that a procedure and GMP and GDP actions were taken appropriately. Records can range from entries in a logbook to entries on a special data collection form to a special report that could be written on a particular topic. Usually, a procedure defines what the record is to include, when it is written, and who reviews and keeps it. For records to be really useful, the information needs to be retained in an easy-to-access way, so those needing the information, whether that information is on paper or electronically stored, can have it available to them. A well-prepared record has 9 characteristics. These characteristics apply to records whether they're written on paper or kept electronically. A record is permanent. Information cannot be erased, washed off, or disappear for the period of time that information is to be kept. Sometimes that is 1, 2, 5, 7 years, or even more. In the pharmaceutical industry, we use indelible ink, so it can't wash away. If you're using electronic data, there's backup to ensure that if that hard drive crashes, that the information is still available. A record needs to be legible. That means that the information can be easily read. Sometimes on forms there isn't enough space to write the information. When you are writing information on a document, try to use block letters. Print them, because that's easier to read than cursive or script writing. Records need to be accurate. That means that what is written or collected compares to the original source. Calculations are double-checked by a different person. Rounding a number is performed at the end of a series of calculations. Instructions on significant figures, how many digits are to be captured, are known by those recording and calculating numbers. Records must be prompt. Information needs to be recorded in a timely way. You're recording information right after the event happened, never before. Records need to be clear. Everyone who reads that document needs to be having the same understanding of it. Earlier, we mentioned legibility that has to do with the mechanics of being able to read it. Clear emphasizes that there is no confusion in how people interpret it. Records need to be consistent. All information that is recorded in a record, for example, names, dates, times, and abbreviations, need to be standardized so there's no confusion or question. Records need to be complete. All required information is included. Intentionally blank sections or pages are noted as such. Direct. Information is recorded directly onto the proper form, laboratory notebook, or computer system. You don't want to put information on the back of envelopes or in a place where it can be lost. Finally, the most important characteristic. Everything in a document must be truthful. Truthful means that all entries are, to the writer's knowledge and ability, what really occurred. You want that record to be reliable and trustworthy. When you sign a document with your initials, signature, or e-signature, you're contributing to a document that has integrity. Most documents have the basis for the signature as part of that document. What that means is that it tells specifically what your signature means in that specific situation. Other ways that build integrity into documents is through the process of verifying, reviewing, and double-checking. Verifying usually means that a second person witnessed, saw an event happening. Verification is used for critical important steps like confirming the number of units shipped or that key tasks were done. Usually verification is done by witnessing an action in real time. Reviewing, sometimes also called double-checking, can be done after the event. For example, you might double-check or review a form for completeness before it is filed. Or you might double-check an order before it is sent in for processing. If you're required to verify something, don't take the word of someone who said they did it, even if it's your best friend. You have a legal and ethical obligation to make sure that that action really did occur by having witness to that event. Verifying and double-checking records isn't required by regulatory officials because they think we're lazy or we're not responsible. Everybody can make mistakes. Double-checking and verifying helps to prevent those mistakes and the costly repercussions that those can cause. Documents tell you what to do and how to do something. Records provide evidence that an event, action, or decision was taken. Together, documents and records are critical to be sure that time, temperature-sensitive pharmaceutical products have the safety, identity, strength, purity, and quality that they need to have.